All right, good evening, everybody. How we feeling out there? Welcome to the new age of hosting, brought to you by Basil Hayden's. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Tim Heisler. I'm your Basil Hayden's ambassador covering the East Coast, coming to you live from this beautiful Basil Hayden's bar, which is, of course, in my house, obviously. No, currently in Philadelphia. So excited that you were able to tune in tonight. Whether it's good evening, good afternoon, good late afternoon, we're glad that you're here. We're glad you're going to be spending some time with us. As we're entering the holiday season where we would like to be hosting all of our friends and family in person, we realize that just might not be possible. Before working for Basil Hayden's, longtime bartender in hospitality my whole life. If there is anyone from the hospitality industry joining us this evening, we miss you. We hope you're doing well. We know that you, of all people, cannot be hosting in the way that you would typically like to be right now in the state of COVID. So our thoughts and prayers with you, your family, your loved ones. But tonight we are excited to talk to you a little bit about Basil Hayden's, some cool expressions of ours. In a few minutes, I'll be bringing on my friend Pat Ford. He's the co-founder of Beehive's cheese company, and we'll be doing a little bourbon and cheese pairing before I bring Pat into this lovely Basil Hayden's bar. We got to do a few housekeeping items. You always got to do housekeeping items when you do anything virtual in 2020. So first things first, there's going to be a QR code. It's going to pop up over my shoulder. You can scan that. Okay, that's going to take you to our portal website. You can find more information about the whiskeys, about the cheeses, and about other virtual events that we're going to be hosting in the future. So you can give that a scan and follow along with us this evening. And then also there'll be a Q&A section at the end. So while Pat and I are riffing about these whiskeys and these cheeses, any questions, comments, no complaints, questions or comments that come up, they're going to be vetted. So let's be nice, let's be friendly, and hopefully they find their way to my fancy computer screen over here. We'd love to hear from you, hear what you're drinking at home, any questions you have about hosting at home in these crazy times. But as I already mentioned his name, I would love to invite on my good friend who I met in New York City last year, Pat Ford from Utah. Pat Ford, come on. Where are you at? Can we get him in the screen? There he is. What's up, Pat?
Good. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so good. It's nice to have you here tonight.
It's great to be here tonight.
Yeah, I said briefly, last year we were fortunate enough to be face-to-face at a great event in New York City. Now, little different this evening, but still excited to have you here.
That was an amazing event. Was that a spread that we've never seen before? It was beautiful, and I just am joking, but it will be the way we host today is going to be exactly the same, but different. It's going to just be more intimate and just have fun with it.
Little different. I think last time we had a food artist there, and they actually took your cheeses, and I think they wrote out bourbon across this massive wooden table for everyone. It was a very cool event. But I mentioned earlier, I said co-founder of Beehive. Tell us a little bit about Beehive and how you got into the cheese industry. Where are you out of? Tell us your background.
So Beehive Cheese, we're in the mountains of Utah. We got about 24 inches of snow in the last 24 hours, so we're excited about that for skiing. But my brother-in-law, he's crazy. He called me up about 15 years ago. He says, let's quit our jobs and go make cheese. And we both literally laughed and laughed, and we thought, well, why not? We looked at what was going on in spaces, chocolate, charcuterie, bourbon, everything was happening, and we kept seeing cheese raising its head. And so we thought, you know what, cheese, let's look into this. So we went up to Utah State, they're a cheese school, and we did a 4-day short course in cheese making, and 15 years later, here we are. So wow. It's been an amazing adventure, but wow, the artisan cheese industry in the US has blown up over the last decade.
Do you mind if I ask, you can tell me no, do you mind if I ask what you did pre-cheese? Because I think it's a big risk, just going you know what, I'm out of this, I'm a cheese guy now. What was
exactly. My partner, it's really funny, my partner is my brother-in-law. And we mowed our way through college. We had a little landscaping company. He went off into the tech field, and I went off into sales. I sold recreational property with my father, and we just both kind of had a midlife crisis and said, you know what, let's go do something fun and something that we're passionate about. And Utah State, after they gave us a recipe, our base cheese recipe, the sky was the limit, and we didn't know what we couldn't do. So We did some crazy things, like we were the first ones to rub coffee and lavender on cheese. That was one of our very first experiments. Another one was honey and salt. And these two cheeses just launched us. And that's actually how we met, because we have a friend in Austin, Texas, and when Basil Hayden said they wanted to do a collaborative effort with a cheese company, John thought instantly of us, because we just do these goofy, crazy things, and it was a match made in heaven. We started working with you guys about 2 years ago.
I love it. I love it. Well, we're not gonna break down that partnership yet, because we're gonna get there though. We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Exactly.
Start talking cheese with Pat, we start going a mile a minute. I get it. But I mean, it's an amazing story that 15 years ago you said, you know what? I'm out of this. We're into cheese now. You said it kind of like that, almost like a midlife crisis thing. I think this year a lot of people might have gotten pushed into their midlife crisis maybe before they were ready to. You know what I mean? So now we're finding some ways to bring people back together, which is really nice. But before we dive into that Basil Hayden's cheese collaboration we were talking about, I certainly wouldn't be doing my job for everyone at home if I didn't talk to you first about a little bit of bourbon. Can I do that, Pat? I'm going to do a little bourbon first and then get back to the cheese if you're okay with that.
Please, absolutely.
All right, great. So if you joined us last week, you might have tuned in with our senior ambassador. His name is Mr. Adam Harris. Mr. Adam Harris was probably walking you through Basil Hayden's, but I'm going to give you a refresher, because so many things have happened in just 1 week. So we're going to give you a little refresh on Basil Hayden's and what this small batch bourbon is all about, right? So bourbon, we follow the guidelines of bourbon. You're made in America. You're at least 51% corn. You're put in a brand new charred white oak barrels. You're following those guidelines. You can make bourbon whiskey. So I got myself a nice little pour of this here. And if you have one at home, pour yourself a little glass, you know. If it's not that time of day yet, that's okay. But if you have one, we'll just do a little kind of 101 on how to taste, because we're going to be doing a pairing with this, a cheese pairing with this. And there's a few reasons why we leaned into Basil Hayden's to be that bourbon that we're going to pair with these cheeses. First thing you do before you nose this, take a look at the color on it, right? You always want to take a look at the color on your glass of bourbon. We can't add any caramel coloring or flavorings to this and still label this a bourbon whiskey. So this color on it, this kind of light honey, light straw color, it's going to give you a good idea of maybe how long it's sat in that barrel, or perhaps the proof on it. So Basil Hayden's bottled at 80 proof. That means after we dump those barrels out, we do add a bit of deionized water to bring that alcohol content down, 40% alcohol or 80 proof. So the color, give you an idea of how big of a hug is this bourbon going to give you? And Basil Hayden's is this really elegant, very welcoming. Again, I mentioned 80 proof. So if you're new to the bourbon industry and you're trying to get your foot into the door of American whiskey, this is a great place to start. It is a high rye mash bill. So I mentioned at least 51% corn. The secondary grain we're going to use in that mash bill is typically going to be rye. It's our flavoring grain. We have a very high percentage of that, which adds a nice little spice to Basil Hayden's. And then finish with a little bit of malted barley. As we nose our spirit, and this is not just bourbon or whiskey, but any spirit, as you go to nose your glass, I recommend you always keep your lips open. If you keep your lips closed, you run the risk of getting a big old whiff of ethanol right up your nose. If you kill your sense of smell, you kill your sense of taste. You can't smell, you can't taste. You can't taste the bourbon, you can't taste Pat's cheese. Then why do we even show up tonight, right? So keep your lips open as you nose your whiskey. It's going to help to kind of circulate your breathing. Some nice like kind of light caramel notes on this. And as we taste it, let's roll this whiskey around. Let it hit the sides of your cheek, the roof of your mouth, the back of your tongue. Our previous master distiller would call it the Kentucky Chew. Kind of want to chew your bourbon. It's great stuff. Great stuff. And if you want to add a dash of water, if you want to add an ice cube, totally okay. You can do it however you like. If someone says you're drinking your bourbon wrong, they're not being honest with you. You can drink it however you like. So this was the bourbon that we decided to then reach out to Pat at Beehive and tell us about the cheese that you then created, Pat. I got some left on this plate here. You can't see my plate, but I got some left here at home. What are you working with?
That's perfect. So we did a collaborative effort with Basil Hayden's, and we started it about 2 years ago. Just like your bourbon, it takes time to collaborate and make an amazing cheese. They both take time. You can't rush them. And we started about 2 years ago. About this time last year in New York, we rolled it out. And this cheese has turned into an amazing cheese. and we're going to taste it. But let me do similar to what you did and talk about how to taste cheese. So
Please.
first thing what you want to do is you want to bring the cheese to room temperature. So what you would do is you would take your cheeses out about an hour before you're actually going to eat them and just leave them on the counter in the package. Don't unwrap them, just leave them on the counter. Bring them to room temperature. I like my cheese just slightly above room temperature, so I usually do mine for about 45 minutes. But
I brought mine out about an hour ago, so this was, I mean, we talked about an hour ago, so I knew to do this already, but it's a very good tip, because before you, I didn't know that.
Because cheese has volatiles in it, just like your whiskey and your bourbon, you're going to have different aromatics in the air. And so what you want to do is you want to, like you, sniff your cheese a little bit, and the way a dog sniffs, they have short little sniffs. So put it next to your nose and give it a little bit of a sniff.
I wonder if my mic's picking up me sniffing like a dog right now.
Like your dog?
Yeah.
But it's awesome. Keep your mouth open. And this cheese is great. Another thing that you want to do when you taste cheese is you want to take your time. You don't want to just shove it in your mouth, chew it, and swallow it. You want to really enjoy it. You want to taste it. There are different complexities going on. Your mouth will start to water, and I probably won't be able to talk. But
that's okay.
You want to enjoy.
You want it to water a little bit. That's why you get then your glass of bourbon, when you start to water a little bit, follow it up, and you see how this bourbon and how this cheese play just hand in hand together.
That was the first thing that we noticed when we first made this cheese, is it had a teeny bit of a sweet note in the back, and our cheese naturally, because we have just a beautiful Jersey cow milk cheese, very creamy, very sweet. And so the pairing was amazing from the get-go. And one of our rules of thumbs when we try an experiment is if you don't just say, oh my goodness, that was amazing, when you first taste it, we usually don't have a winner. So, and we all just got a big grin on our face when this first came out.
So you said you're using Jersey cow milk and Basil Hayden's, but you're in Utah. So how are we getting the Jersey cow milk, and how is the Basil Hayden's really actually, where does the meeting happen? Where does the Basil Hayden's get introduced to the cheese, and what part of the process?
So Jersey, not from Jersey, like New Jersey, but a Jersey cow.
Northeast boy. That's right here. You know?
They're the pretty brown cows with the pretty eyes that you see at the fair. But they give us high milk fat. When I bring in 10 pounds of milk, I only get 1 pound of cheese. So Jersey cows give us a lot of fat, a lot of cream, and therefore they gives us a very smooth, creamy cheese when we add it. But we actually age the cheese first, and then our fermentation process relies on our bacteria to develop different flavors. And if I immediately washed it in alcohol, it would kill my bacteria and I would have no flavor. So we wash it at the very end, and it's just a very simple, seeps into the cheese, and it's throughout the cheese. It's very creamy. It's an amazing cheese.
That makes total sense about not interrupting that fermentation process. So coming from the whiskey side of things, I can grasp. You say Jersey cow though, and I start getting confused. Sorry, that's
That's good.
It's the Northeast part of me coming out. I apologize. So
there you go.
But that pairing is just fantastic. And so this was, as Pat mentioned, we last year we got to introduce this cheese, which was great. Pour me a slice, and then I know we this year I emailed you, and I wanted to get some samples of this to give to some bartenders and some friends and family of mine. And you said, hey, like, good news for you. I didn't need to email you directly anymore, because now you actually just got picked up by some pretty big names. If I do say so myself. I think you can find it just about anywhere now.
Yep, we are shipping the last couple weeks for a holiday promotion for all the Kroger stores nationally, Trader Joe's as well. All the stores nationally did this in November, and so you can get it, and it has taken off. It's an amazing cheese. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Now everyone's got their hands on it, so I can't just email you directly and have like the hookup. So now I got to go.
Yes, you can. Yes, you
can. All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, because we were saying we just got you say you got a tote. I think you have more Basil Hayden's at your cheese shop than I have at home. And well, I mean, I don't have all the Basil Hayden's at home, but I think a good amount. But I think you got a bit more over at your cheese shop now.
Yeah, when we called up at the distillery and they said, "So do you want a tanker?" And we're like, "No, we want something a little like a rail tanker." And we're like, "No, something a little smaller than that." But we brought in 500 gallons, and it was awesome. So
man, I know there's a lot of bourbon people out there watching tonight that are just thinking of what a tanker of Basil Hayden's might do, and it's for making cheese. Okay, don't get just a bottle. Right. A bottle is just great, just what you need for at home, enjoying with your family and your friends. You know what I mean? So, man, we're sending tankers over. So yeah, this cheese is really taking off, which is great. It's really exciting. And then so from there, actually, I worked with Pat, and this was my introduction to Beehive. Was this pour me another slice cheese, which was just great. And then this year, as we started working on doing some more virtual tastings and some more pairings, Basil Hayden's being a traditionally high rye bourbon, this year we actually launched our 10-year straight rye, right? So as opposed to being a straight bourbon, which is majority corn, now we got our 10-year straight rye. So majority rye going in the mash bill, backed up by some corn and a little bit of malted barley, 10 years old, bottled at 80 proof. Again, when it comes to a welcoming, hello, how are you? Nice to meet you kind of rye whiskey. I think a lot of people get intimidated because when they hear rye whiskey, they think it's going to maybe really dry you out or kick you in the side of the cheek. And some of them certainly do that. I really enjoy some of the ones that do that. But this 10-year expression from Basil Hayden's is, again, it's this approachable, elegant, really refined rye whiskey. And so I said, all right, well, we got this, pour me another slice, which paired perfectly with Basil Hayden's. It was made with Basil Hayden's. So I emailed my friend Pat. I said, hey, can you send me just a variety of all the other cheeses you got and that you're working on? Because I would love to try to find something to pair with this. So again, I'll do a little nose, a little taste of this. I think rye whiskeys, we're going to get a bit more of that spice, but a lot of ryes can tend to have a bit of a floral note. And sometimes it can get hidden, it can get masked, and the cheese that we decided going with just pulls out that floral note, this almost lavender note that is just, I went across, I don't know how many cheeses you sent me, I don't know, 8 or 9, and the cheese we decided on was, Pat, I'll let you talk about the cheese, but it was a perfect pairing.
The genius behind this cheese, my business partner has an amazing palate, and my wife and I were in the mountains in southern Portugal in the spring, and it was amazing. The smell was everywhere of orange blossoms. And my wife said, if we could make a cheese that had the aroma of orange blossoms, wouldn't that be amazing? We told Tim that. Tim said, well, let's try. And so we rubbed the Earl Grey tea, which has the bergamot in it, and it's amazing. Like you said, it has a bright, clean, floral finish, and it's just amazing with the cheese and the rye.
I was nervous this one. Even just reading the description, I thought it was going to really overpower it, but it was just the right amount of flavor, and again balanced out with this rye. It was. I love it. I absolutely love it. This is one I'm personally ordering more of to do this pairing at home and this time of year right now. So
we've got more of it for you, and it's green and pretty for the holidays, and so
right.
There you go.
And what are some of the other ones? So I mean, you mentioned these rubs that you're doing. So what are some of the other ones that you sent me? What are the few other ones that you kind of seen becoming either popular or the ones you've seen really kind of moving the brand right now?
I'll tell you what, we started with the Jersey cow milk, beautiful Irish style cheddar we call Promontory. It's our base cheese, amazing cheese. But after we'd been making cheese for a few months, Tim and I looked at each other and said, there's a lot of really nice white cheddars out there. We need to do something a little different, a little bit more interesting, innovative. And he thought, you put cream in coffee. Why not coffee on cream? We rubbed some ground coffee on the cheese, threw some ground lavender on there. It's called Barely Buzzed. It was our #1 selling cheese. And guess what's our #1 selling cheese now? Pour me a slice.
Pour me a slice. I would hope so. It's got the basil going in, so I would hope so.
There you go. That's right. So we did a honey and salt rub cheese. We have a New Mexico Hatch chili cheese. I mean, we've got some beautiful cheeses, but
the chili cheese is the one I remember very much enjoying. But that was one that for me again overpowered these a little bit.
Right.
Plenty. I mean, I'd lean more towards a certain style of beer or something in that regards as far as a pairing. I love that cheese, but it was one that certainly it had a solid kick to it, like a really nice kick to it. It was great. But
Well, thank you. We just love making crazy cheeses, and people love eating them, so we love it.
I can tell. I mean, 15 years in, and you're still doing it. You're still innovating. You're still coming out with new stuff. It's great.
It's fun.
But we've been talking about doing these pairings. You know, again, you and I were hoping, we off camera, we were talking about maybe trying to do one of these February and March. Might try to come out to Utah to do one, but TBD if I'll be allowed to do that. But I mean, going into the holidays, you know, I've always looked at Basil Hayden's as a great gift-giving bourbon. It's one of those whiskeys I think you can show up to a house with safely, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 people. It's one of those bourbons or one of those ryes that whether you're a novice or whether you're an experienced whiskey drinker, it's one that you can appreciate. So it's always for me been like a bottle I bring to people's houses. As we're entering, you know, this new age of hosting and hosting during COVID and the holidays, what are some, I don't know, at least when it comes to like the cheese industry and how you typically host, what do you see this holiday season looking and feeling like?
You know, we mentioned that fantastic event in New York last year. The spread was beyond belief. It was so beautiful, so amazing. But you know what? People are wanting to get together. And if they can have some good cheese and some good bourbon and some good friends, then the night is going to be a success regardless, even if it's not this amazing, huge spread. Way back when I used to cut wood with a friend, when you cut it, when you split it, and when you burn it. And so when we're making a cheese plate, I want to give an analogy. So if you can create something that you're going to share with your friends, and you can dream it up and go out and get the ingredients for a cheese plate in advance so that you're not rushing back to the party and you're frantic and crazy, you'll enjoy that part of it. The next part is creating, what am I going to put on this with this bourbon and cheese? And the sky is the limit. There's charcuterie, there's stone fruits, there's crackers, chocolate. I mean, again, whatever you want to put together.
I'm a texture person, so having the perfect cracker or delivery device for the cheese is huge for me. I'm all about texture. I like having some crunch, so I'm really big on that aspect of it. But I mean, if you're doing it at home, smaller plates. I know you sent me some really nice, just like individual cheese boards, which is great. So if I have a few people over, I can safely cut it, plate it all up, as opposed to the kind of larger, bigger spreads I think you and I were used to seeing. So now you can, and again, I mean, when it comes to pouring people individual whiskeys, I hope everyone has enough glassware at home so that all of their guests have their own glass. If you don't, let me know. I'll send some to you. But yeah, so I mean, it's smaller plates, nice and clean, nice and simple. And again, the pairings we're talking about tonight, I'd encourage people to go out and find a few different bourbons or a few different ryes and try a couple of Pat's cheeses and see where your palate lands on. See where your friend's palate lands on. We don't all have the same palate. I say that at every tasting and virtual event I've ever done. We don't all have the same palate. If we all had the same palate, you wouldn't be tuned in right now, right? So, you know, change it up. Find some new stuff. That's definitely the move.
And have fun producing these beautiful boards that you're going to present to everybody in their own little space. And you know what? Have the lighting right and have the temperature right and have the ambiance right so that you can just sit and enjoy each other's company. And it can be a really wonderful experience regardless whether there's 2 of you or 4 of you. It just is going to be a wonderful evening shared together with great food and great conversation.
Pat, you just said, and I'm embarrassed that I didn't say it first, because going back to my restaurant days, I said I used to always ask all the new hires, I'd say, what are the 3 things every guest doesn't realize they realize as soon as they walk in?
I learned that from you, by the way, too.
Lighting, volume, temperature. We talked about, and you took it from me last year, and I'm glad you just brought it up because I forgot. And it's so true. Lighting, volume, and temperature. The first thing you notice when you walk into someone's house without realizing it is the lighting, the volume, and the temperature. I I know there's a lot of types of people in the world, but I always use, at the restaurant, I'd say there's two. When you go into someone's house, it's either you walk in, next thing you know, your shoes are off, you got a cheese plate, you got 2 bourbons or 2 whiskeys in front of you, maybe a glass of wine, and you don't even know how it happened and the conversation's flowing. That's the first type of person. The other type of person, you walk in their house and they just say, beer's in the fridge. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like the, which style host do you want to be? And I like to think that coming, again, from the restaurants, that when someone does come over to my place, I'm certainly type number 1. And the music's going, and the food's already there, and the drinks are in their hands without them having to ask for it. So, man, glad you reminded me of that, Pat. Yeah,
you're welcome.
Sharp as a tack. I appreciate you. Must have been taking notes. That was a year ago.
Yes.
Must have been taking notes.
But just have fun and just enjoy each other. That's what we're all craving right now, is just
every day
social interaction with our friends. So
every day.
Yep.
Hey, so I got my screen over here and I see stuff getting highlighted. It looks like we got some questions coming in from the guests out there. So if you're okay with it, Pat,
perfect.
I'm going to jump into some Q&A. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in and asking questions. It means the world to us. We appreciate it. First one is for you, Pat. And I should have said this earlier. Where does the name Beehive come from? What was the inspiration behind that?
Beehive, Utah is the Beehive state. A lot of people don't know that, but we're the Beehive state, and we wanted to bring back the local creamery close to home, and we did, and we wanted that name, and we've enjoyed it.
Cool. Well, Adam, there you go. So little bigger props to Utah on that one. Let's see. What is the next we got? Are there any types of cheeses that you would avoid pairing with bourbon, like a soft cheese or an overripe one, or any particular flavors? You know what? I would say when you look at the diversity and the array of flavors that you can find in the bourbon world, if you're looking at something, again, like an approachable 80 proof Basil Hayden's compared to something like a cast strength, uncut, non-chill filled Booker's or a Knob Creek single barrel, the flavors are so diverse when you look at the world of bourbon that I can't say there's any cheeses I would stray away from. I think some might be more difficult to find that maybe match made in heaven, like we've kind of found with some of these. But I can't say there's any I would just say, absolutely not. You're not going to find one that pairs with it. There's going to be a whiskey out there that wants to hang out with that cheese. I would challenge you to maybe find some of those maybe overly aggressive, like think about some real funky blue cheeses, something really aggressive like that. That to me would be a challenge. Off the top of my head, I can't think of what I would go to. I'd have to actually sit down and do that pairing. But there's none I would say to go against.
And the cool thing nowadays is you can go into a cheese shop and you can have them cut just a sliver of cheese, take it home and try it before your guests arrive. And if it's terrible, then don't do it.
I thought you were going to say then you pull your flask out of your pocket and you say, hey, I need to have a little bit of, okay.
The shop. There you go.
Different. Yeah. We're in different, yeah. But, yeah, very good point. Get a little sample before you dive into the whole wheel. All right. So Zach, I hope that covered it. I know I kind of just said, try them all. Tracy says, any great recipes to share that include Beehive cheese? So Pat, I'll kick that to you. Are there any recipes of incorporating this cheese maybe into another fashion for at-home cooks? So
cheese boards, obviously. The tea hive I love with anything citrus, like a kiwi, a strawberry, oranges, so it pairs amazingly well with that. I've done shaved this, pour me a slice on the top of like a mac and cheese and broiled it right at the end. The sky's the limit. The au gratin potatoes, it sounds crazy, but it's
no,
amazing.
That's what I was thinking. I mean, because you do have, again, this great base, the great base cheese that you were talking about. And I feel like it would be extremely versatile in the kitchen.
Yep.
And then when you get into the rubs, again, we talked about some of your chili rubs or some of your spicy ones that might actually have it's gonna play into a different realm, different maybe style of cuisine. So I think there's a lot of options coming from your lineup, if you will.
You mentioned earlier the Barely Buzzed, which is the coffee and lavender rub.
Oh,
that's my go-to cheese to make a grilled cheese sandwich with. I mean, it's totally bizarre, but it's amazing. So
I don't think it's bizarre. I love that. It's a great cheese. Yeah, I think it's great.
good.
All right, I'm squinting. You can tell I need to get glasses after looking at computers for 9 months straight now. Michelle, any spicy cheeses? Oh, are spicy cheeses with Basil Hayden's a no-go? Well, Basil Hayden's does have a mild spice to it coming from that rye. I think because it is an 80 proof, and I would say a more almost like delicate and softer and approachable, I think it can get overwhelmed, but it just depends on the level of intensity of that spice. You know what I mean? The reason that we paired this pour me another slice is because of that kind of sweet kick that it has, and those flavors just played very, very well for me personally. Pat, would you say spicy cheeses you might lean towards either a different?
You might want to go with like a brown beer, maybe not bourbon and whiskey, but again, try it. If you like it, great. If you don't, move on to something else.
Yeah, I think too, personally, when I think of a spicier style cheese, I mean, a brown beer is a great example. If I got a bit of like a hot spice burn, I feel like I just want a larger sip of something. So, I mean, for me, that brown beer or something like that would work really, really well. But yeah, I think again for the Basil Hayden's and the kind of flavor profile that we attain with this bourbon, I like these mildly sweet and mildly almost bitter to it. So, but Michelle, great question. But again, it's got your palate could be way different, Michelle. I don't want to steer you wrong. So I don't want to get an angry email if you love it. So I don't want to get myself in any trouble. And I believe this is the last question we got coming in. Any suggestions when picking out cheese for a well-rounded cheese board? That's a great question. Pat, that is all you.
That's a great question. So just fall in love with whatever cheeses that you like. Go to your local wonderful cheese shop, have them help you. But if you have a clock, 12 o'clock is always the first mildest cheese. And as you go clockwise around the board, then you will progress with a little bit stronger cheese. Pour me a slice would be a good example. As you keep going around the wheel, maybe a Parmesan or a Gouda. And then as you get towards the top of the clock, you're going to go back to some of the stinkier cheeses, the soft ripened, Harbison, those types of cheeses, and just have fun with it.
Yeah, and I mean, that's actually, I like that idea of using like a clock mentality. I say also when you get into building out a great bourbon wheel, if you will, or bourbon flight, start with your lower proof bourbons or rye, start with your lower proof whiskeys and work your way up into those bigger, bolder, sometimes a bit more like Pat said, maybe a bit more aggressive style whiskeys and cheeses. And maybe those higher proofs and those aggressive whiskeys will kind of go hand in hand with those more aggressive cheeses. But always start on that mild side and work your way around, and if you got 3 or 4 options, hopefully all of your guests will at least love 1 or 2 of them. Maybe they got to start trading some if they have to. Safely.
There you go.
But, offer some for everyone. So, well, great. Well, those are the questions that came through. So thank you, at-home viewers, for tapping away. We appreciate it. Pat, I know we're kind of at time. We actually went 2 minutes over. So I just want to say thank you again for joining us tonight. It means the world to get to do these weird news style of reality hosting with you. I'm coming to Utah.
Fun. Thanks, Tim.
That's what it is, right? I'm coming to Utah next year.
Heck yes.
Awesome. Cool.
Thank you so much. You guys just have fun with it. Get together with your friends, stay apart, have fun, enjoy each other's company. And if you have a foundation of cheese and bourbon, you're not going to go wrong. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Pat. We appreciate it. All right. Now coming back to you at home, tuning in. Again, as Pat said, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you chiming in. We hope you learned something. I hope you're able to find these beautiful products. There's going to be a QR code popping up again over my shoulder. If you follow that, you can find a replay of tonight. And again, all the information on the cheeses and the whiskeys that Pat and I were talking about. You can find these cheeses now at many more stores. Hopefully, this is at your local liquor store. The 10-year rye was released in May. If you can still get your hands on it, great. It's worth grabbing a bottle, especially for the holiday season. Also, next week, this is only part 2 of 4 of this Basil Hayden series. So next week, my colleague Beth Burrows will be on here chatting all things dessert and tips and tricks for some desserts, and hosting at home with desserts, how Basil Hayden's pairs well in the dessert category as well. On behalf of myself, on behalf of Basil Hayden's, thank you again. We hope that you are staying well. We hope you're staying safe. We hope you're staying sane. So please enjoy the holiday season. Take care of one another. Do something nice for a stranger. You know, when's the last time you did something nice for a stranger? It's such a nice thing to do. So thank you again for being here. Be well, be safe. And Tim Heisler, tune in out. Until next time.